Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar this evening. We are delighted to bring to you the second edition of our webinar series, Conversations 101, this time with a focus on the retail sector. My name is Sharan, and I will be one of the moderators for today's session. Before we begin, I would like to take a couple of minutes and perhaps lay out the structure to today's webinar. We will first have our co-founder Anup Kuruvella address our audience, which will then be followed by a brief introduction to today's set of panelists and moderators. We shall then commence the discussion between our moderators and panelists before opening the floor to the audience for any questions. It is my sincere request for our attendees to kindly keep themselves on mute in order to prevent any sort of disturbance. Thank you. Anup, if I could request you to please take this forward.
Thank you, Sharan. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Anup Kuruvella, and I am based in Bangalore. During the day, I work with entrepreneurs and investors in helping them achieve their goals through my work as one of the co-founders of OneCrowd. Early mornings, I cycle or play tennis, and during the weekends, I work with people with disabilities in my capacity as one of the trustees of Cheshire Homes India. This is our second edition of Conversations 101, a series of interactive conversations on topics of importance to our various OneCrowd stakeholders. Today's session, I'm sure, will be an exciting one as we have three of our most successful retail-focused startup founders ask three of our most experienced retail specialists from our mentor team questions most dear to them. I would like to sincerely thank both our enthusiastic moderators as well as our distinguished panelists for volunteering to take part in this exciting discussion. Thank you, Anusha, Indrajit, and Aditya, and Sanjay, Vasant, and Vinod. We also have a very interesting audience today, and I would like to welcome all of you for today's session. Some of you know OneCrowd well, but I am glad to see that there are many new names also here today. And for their benefit, let me give you a brief background of OneCrowd. We are a 10-person venture capital team operating out of two cities, Mumbai and Bangalore. We have a portfolio of about 30 odd startups and an AUM of about 125 crores. Our investors are of two types, discretionary and non-discretionary. Discretionary investors invest through our platform. In other words, they have the right to say yes or no to any particular deal. And a non-discretionary investors invest through our angel fund, which is a SEBI-approved Category 1 fund. We are raising a small amount of capital today into our fund, and in case you would be interested, do contact any of our OneCrowd team members. We expect to announce the final close of the fund in about 2 months. Or else, you are most welcome to invest through our platform should you prefer to be a discretionary investor. Let me now hand over the proceedings to Sharan, who will now introduce the panelists. Over to you, Sharan.
Thank you, Anup. Ladies and gentlemen, truth be told, today's set of panelists really require no introduction. We are honored to have amongst us the three veterans of the retail industry. We're delighted to welcome Sanjay Guha. Sanjay has over 30 years of experience in the consumer goods space across India, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. As his last stint, Sanjay was the president of Coca-Cola for the UK, Ireland, Nordics, and Indonesian region. Currently, Sanjay spends his time mentoring and advising select companies, and he is also an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad. We are also pleased to welcome Vasant Kumar. Vasant is currently a senior advisor at Samara Capital and holds over 30 years of experience in the consumer goods, retail, fashion, and e-commerce spaces. At his previous stint, Vasant was the MD at Lifestyle International and has also held multiple roles at Landmark Group and Max Fashion. He is also an alumnus of XLRI Jamshedpur. We're also pleased to welcome Vinod Nambiar. Vinod is currently the MD at More Retail, one of the largest supermarket chains in the country, and has over 30 years of experience across leadership roles at HUL and Colgate. Vinod is also an alumnus of IIM Calcutta. As for the moderators to today's session, we have the founders of select OneCrowd portfolio companies. I will now request each of them to give a brief introduction on themselves along with their businesses. Anusha, if I could request you to go first.
Sure, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Anusha. I run a wellness beverages brand called Smoothies. It's an omni-channel business with presence across retail, e-commerce, food service, and D2C. I'm an IIM Calcutta alumnus, and I did my undergraduate at the London School of Economics. Prior to starting out, prior to Smoothies, I did a management consulting stint with Bain & Company in Mumbai, and I did my analyst years with Deutsche Bank in London.
Thank you for that, Anusha. Indrajit, if I could request you to go next.
Hi everybody. My name is Indrajit Roy. I'm the founder of Hoy Foods. Hoy Foods is a cloud kitchen company. Currently, we are operating in Delhi and Bangalore across 45 kitchens. And we also have a D2C vertical by the name of Hoy Pure, where we have our own website and we sell a lot of frozen ready-to-eat products under the Hoy Pure banner, as well as other products as well. I'm an IIT Delhi graduate, 2010 batch, started my career with Pepsi, did consulting in various assignments, and from 2017, I'm running Hoy full-time as a vertical.
Thank you for that, Indrajit. Aditya, if I could request you to go next.
Sure. Hi everyone, glad to be here. This is Aditya Sanghvi, founder of Snackable. Snackable is an online first health snacks brand based out of Bombay. We sell predominantly through our website, but we do have presence in general trade and other channels as well. We have a range of over 50 products which are highly differentiated, catering to a more health conscious population. And to give you a quick background on me, I'm born, brought up in Bombay, went to UK to do a degree in business and finance from Cardiff Business School, came back to India, worked with a consulting firm called Themis before starting Snackable.
Thanks, Aditya. Thank you all. We will now commence the discussion between our moderator and panelists. Once again, I request our attendees to keep themselves on mute until the Q&A session begins in order to avoid any sort of disturbance. Anusha, if I could request you to take it forward.
Sure. So my first question would be, over the last few years, there's been increasing consolidation within the modern retail space. Do you see a continuation of this trend over the next few years? And how does this impact the way early stage brands should tailor their retail strategies? I would open this to, well, anyone on the panel.
So let me start because I think I think modern trade by nature consolidates wherever in the world you go. And over the years, you look at countries, you have extreme consolidation in some countries like Australia, and much less in India. But India, by any stretch of imagination, is not consolidated. I think the consolidation, the way I think about it, is far away. But more importantly, I think modern trade will expand, and I think that is a huge opportunity for both brands and modern trade, right? But the most exciting thing about India is that modern trade will expand in a very robust omni-channel fashion. So you'll have companies like ours which really believe in it and will drive it. But I think everybody worth its salt in retail is now starting with an app, trying to do omni-channel. So that will be the future. Two things that I think about for brands. First is, when modern trade consolidates, brands should be very careful and clear that they must have fair and transparent terms. Because one of the biggest pitfalls with consolidation is that you start thinking modern trade is important and have differentiated terms for your customers. And when they start to consolidate, you have happy days when A buys B and you discover that B has much better terms than A, and suddenly you lose a whole chunk of business. So early in your brand's life, make sure your sales organizations do not give differentiated terms, right? And when I think of terms differently. There are terms and there are conditions. Terms must be uniform. Conditions must be based on service, right? So separate your whatever I call your terms to trade, and make sure that your terms are uniform to everybody and your conditions are service oriented so that you can actually buy services from trade. One very obvious thing is focus on consumption, measure sales per square foot for your retailers, right? The key parameter that I look at as a retailer is the sales of a brand per square foot, right? So, I like brands that actually come to us and tell us what their sales are, measure sales per store, and build database relationships with your customers, right? All retailers today are thinking data, right? And brands which can offer data beyond what the retailers have will be preferred partners. But that's what I think is really, really important as trade consolidates or expands actually in India.
It's interesting. Is there anybody else on the panel who would like to add to that?
To add to what Vinod said, instead of looking at consolidation, the whole FMCG industry in India is getting organized. Modern trade is already organized and well advanced. But now, over the next 4 or 5 years, even the mom and pop stores will get more organized. There is technology that is being made available. There are service providers who are going to create those warehousing and supply chain logistics to reach even the smaller stores in tier 2, tier 3. So very fast, you see a lot of traditional stores getting organized, and information flow also is going to happen. So they'll be able to access real-time information about the products, pricing, promotions, and supply chain, which was a big hurdle for smaller stores, are also getting easier because there are marketplace companies who will be providing products also at their doorstep. And there is also evolving 3PL logistics that is coming. So overall, the whole FMCG market in India, which was largely unorganized, is in a mode of fast track into getting organized. And that means that there's a lot of opportunity for brands and products which are giving unique propositions to enter their shelf, enter their catalog, and through them also connect with the end consumers. So there is a B2B route which is opening up severely, which was earlier not easy in the earlier system of lack of bandwidth and also lack of infrastructure, supply chain, as well as the information flow. Both were not there. Now it is happening.
Great. I mean, so, and what I'm hearing is overall, I think consolidation, or as Vinod said, not consolidation, or organization, is leading to more data for brands. And I think it'll be important for us to capitalize on that and make the right decisions. Sanjay, if you'd like to add to that, that would be great.
No, I agree with the points that were made both by Vinod and Vasant. My only thought is that is follow the consumer. That's the headline of what I would say to you. Think about who your consumers at this point and where they shop and how they shop. And that helps you decide where to start. These are not either or between channels that you're talking about. And I certainly think that in the current world, we are spoiled for choice. So if you want to drive home consumption, you have so many choices from your own channels to e-commerce to retail. The choice is, of course, based on where you have control, where you have data, where you think you make the good margins. But it's also follow the consumer before you decide which channel to go. Think about where they shop, and I think that should be the governing principle.
I mean, so when we talk about customer data, actually, my next question sort of borders on this, which is, one of the relative advantages of D2C sales today, which a lot of startup brands are focusing on, and this is relative to, let's say, modern trade, is the availability of your customer data. So who they are, where they are, how much do they spend, basket level data. and the ability to reach out to these customers and understand their behavior. As a brand scales and starts moving to offline, and particularly general trade, what would your recommendations be to maintain a pulse on your customer base and ensure that you can still gather feedback and feed that back into your product and marketing strategy? I assume also that brands that we're talking about are relatively nascent and would not be able to commission sort of large scale surveys.
So, I cannot agree with you more about the fact that startups cannot afford and don't need to commission large scale research. But what I would say is that having a deep consumer understanding, or whether you call them customers, but consumer understanding is a crucial capability that every founder must have, irrespective of their functional background. And you have to decide and develop your own playbook. And you need to implement that playbook regularly, not sporadically. And to focus on not just what consumers say, their attitude, but what they actually do, which is their behavior. There is no shortage of data. Observation is often the most powerful data. In the good old days, we used to do all the time trade visits and was mandated. And we used to go around the GT market. And it gave you extremely insightful understanding of your consumers, the competition, and the category. Just walking down a retail aisle and looking at shoppers and the baskets that they have gives you a very good understanding of what they're buying and what is the aggregate of products that they take. So the point I'll make is observation is powerful. You don't have to only have data. You've got to decide your playbook. You cannot do it sporadically, otherwise you'll never learn. It's got to be a muscle that you build in yourself and then make it an organizational muscle.
Very interestingly, so I worked for a long time for a very big brand, which was GT driven in the world, right? I mean, if you think of Colgate as a brand, and we always thought that we had enough data, right? Because, you can talk to consumers, you can talk to retailers and get a lot of data. However, I think when you run a D2C brand, you can, I don't think you need to worry about data as long as you use the data you already have, right? So if you're a D2C brand expanding to general trade, right, I think you're already in a good place if you can use the data that you get. Because as Sanjay said, consumers shop across different channels, but their fundamental attitude towards a brand does not change depending on where they shop. Right. So if you understand why they shop on a D2C channel, you've got a pretty good idea of why they will shop in a general trade channel, because they're buying a brand, right? So I think if you have a D2C business, continue to glean data from the D2C business in a sensible fashion, and look at trends in general trade. So I don't think you will be short of data. I don't think you will be short of data. I think, as rightly Sanjay said, I don't think data is the short element here. It is analyzing and using it in an insightful fashion, which is where we all come short, right? And big companies much more than startups, I think. Big companies much more.
Yeah, in fact, both Sanjay and Vinod that put it well. One approach which in retail, which we used to do, is the thing called customer journey. In fact, that's what Sanjay also hinted at. If you are able to track how the customer thinks about the need which is being fulfilled by the product, how the customer is going about shopping the product, and how the customer is using, somewhere immersive understanding about how they are using also will help. So more than the quantity of data and quantity of the number of customer surveys you have, if you are able to focus on the quality, in D2C, you are differentiating through quality. So if you are able to get into quality of the data you have and get more deeper understanding about the customer's habit and how they are consuming the product, how it is enhancing their lifestyle, that may give a lot of clues on your product improvement or any adaptation and all, or variants and all that can come through that. You need not worry about the amount of data points which you need to.
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. I'm going to hand over to Indrajit next, who will take over for me.
Sure. Thank you, Anusha. So the question which I have in my mind is that, when you are a startup and you are running a D2C plus D2C way of selling your specifically food products, and you also going to retail. When you are internet first, launching many SKUs are pretty easy as compared to you launch in retail, because you get feedback very fast, launching is very fast, and eventually you have a plethora of SKUs which you want to sell through your own website. But when you go to a retail, that's another nightmare. When you have to launch so many SKUs, and you also don't get the economies of scale from a single SKU, which you get if you have a higher sale of a single SKU. So fundamentally, what do you suggest to a startup? They should either find their heroes, launch minimum SKU and scale the reach, or launch multiple SKUs and maximize the sales wherever they are. Yeah. So this is a question which is in my mind, and I think any of you guys can answer this.
Let me try and. I think selection is a key consumer criteria, right? And we talk about, but that's a retail backwards point. When you're a brand seller, I'm a big believer in power brands and power SKUs, right? Building power SKUs, I think, is a critical metric for a brand, right? Power SKUs tend to drive penetration. Penetration is such a big value for a brand compared to anything else, right? Power SKUs also drive efficiencies, right? So I think if you build a brand and build power SKUs which are well and truly distinct, you don't need a fragmented portfolio, right? I think fragmentation is a lazy way to grow a business, right? Think big brands, and Sanjay's run a big brand like Coca-Cola. I've worked in, I mean, those companies are built on power brands, power SKUs, not even power brands, right? And I don't think fragmentation is a way to grow a business. I think it actually takes away from a business.
Actually, that's absolutely true. My take, Indrajit, if I understand your question, is that any brand, I'll make 2 points. Any brand, when they launch, must launch with whatever they define as their core SKUs or power SKUs, as Vinod was saying. And that is based on your segmentation of your target group. So if I have a food brand that I believe will do very well with single and dual households, and I believe it's a large volume in families, I will have packaging SKUs that cater to both. And they will be core to my business. If I want to sell a hair care brand, and I think that half my population has normal hair and another half has dry hair, I will have 2 SKUs. But I will not be niche. I will not put anything in the market. I'll define a job description for each SKU. And then I would launch that. And my second point is that irrespective of which channel you launch, we do get a bit lazy in a D2C channel because we can throw anything out, which is not easy when we go to third-party channels.
Yeah.
But we should avoid that, because you would end up with supply chain costs that are invisible and add enormous complexity. So define your core SKUs based on your segmentation of consumers. They would have a job description, and then spend money on promotions, packaging, assortments to drive them. And then once you have built those, think about adding or deleting to create more consumer choice, not paralysis, or optimize your supply chain cost.
Sure.
Surely power SKU is the way to go, particularly when you are into a D2C segment where you have your customer understanding right. Having said that, over a period of time, customers may get there may be a need for customer variants to be added. Here you should be careful on whether the customers need or retailers need. Sometimes retailers, for the sake of it, they may be asking for more, but the customers still will come and repeatedly buy their favorite SKUs. So you should distinguish the difference. But if there's a new innovation you are doing, which will improve the variety and improve the stickiness for the consumer, then for the sake of that, you can always pilot additional SKUs with a certain time frame and see the velocity. If that fulfills your ability to service it efficiently, then that can get into the core maybe after a period of time. So that way you can have a dual strategy, have core well nourished and leading the whole volume. And you can always periodically add some variants with customer need, new emerging needs in mind, not going by purely what the retailer wants. If customer is kept at the core, customer is kept at the center of the need for adding variants, then you will not go wrong. That's my take on it.
Understood. So clearly, power SKUs are the way forward to build a brand along it. That's very, very helpful. So I think my next question is very related to the first one itself, where when we are running a D2C store, to make a D2C store profitable, at least unit economics sustainable or profitable, the average order value has to be on a higher side. Anything less than 700, you cannot be unit economics profitable because you have a delivery and customer acquisition cost, which is very high. But when you design a product, when you put an MRP or pricing of the product, the D2C way always talks about that you have to keep on a higher side so that your AOV should be higher so that it makes sense. But when you talk about MT and in the future could think about GT, you think about how to reduce the price, how to make it more pocket friendly. So for an omni-channel brand, deciding on the pricing of the product, how a startup one should think about it.
So okay, let me start. So the most effective way that I've seen people manage pricing in omnichannel is by having differentiated SKUs. Okay. So if you're in a beverage business, you'll always find that in the HoReCa channel, you might have a 300 ml pack. And in a GT channel, you have a 200 ml pack. Or you do exclusive. So for a long time, single wash or single use sachet was exclusively to GT because it was pricing and affordable, and you use different other packaging for other channels. Or indeed, even to differentiate within a channel between retailers, you often use multi-packs as the route. So in a big modern retailer, you might use 6-pack as your lead, and somewhere else you might use 12-pack, depending on the nature of the consumers who shop there. So somehow differentiating by SKUs is a very sensible way to do it. It's not always possible, but where it's not possible, follow competition. I think that will give you good guidelines on how they are doing it, and there must be something good or bad they're doing, which you can analyze. But I'll make another point, which is that particularly in GT, and the notion of affordability and price competitiveness. Bear in mind that this is not just a consumer issue. What really works at times is also being competitive relative to your competition as far as the GT retailer is concerned. Think about secondary packaging. If you can sell a 8-pack, secondary pack, for $1,000, and that's a sharp point for a retailer to buy at $1,000, not the consumer, retailer. You could probably get quicker penetration than selling a 12-pack at 1,500 rupees. So secondary packaging is an important aspect of being competitive in the GT trade because it's being competitive for the retailer.
Sure.
So one point which always one should bear in mind is customers should never feel that they got shortchanged in this whole pricing and packaging. they should feel that the right value is being delivered. Because while the channels are different, the customers are flipping across channels and they may choose to buy between online or offline, GT, modern trade, they keep on flipping. So brand should never get exposed as a brand which is skewed in terms of their pricing strategy. So that is very important. And the smart way is, Sanjeev said, get into the packaging route so that customers will not get into all this thinking.
There's, Indrajit, I track this very carefully. I
Okay.
take big brands and track channel pricing, right? Because that's what we have to do, right? And generally, I found brands, GT will be at 100, small box will be at 96, 97, right? Big box will be at 89, 90, 91, right? And that's a kind of, when this kind of balance seems to work, right? So in my supermarkets, I can take a brand and sell it about 3-4% below GT, right? And GT doesn't complain, right? If I sell it 15% below GT, and you as a brand owner give me the opportunity to do that, right? Then you'll have a problem with GT, right? It is a brand owner's responsibility to maintain price balance, right? Don't give that opportunity to retailers to disrupt your price balance, right? The temptation that brands do is, because modern trade is big, individual stores are big, you give modern trade large discounts to disrupt your pricing. And that really puts you out of balance with GT, right? So I would always say keep that balance in mind. There is a balance which you can, and Sanjay said it, track brand prices, track competition and make sure that you don't get that wrong, right? But selling cheap is a bad idea. Pricing is a one-way street, right? And remember, brands pay for it, not retailers, right? Retailers will take the money from you, and I tell big brands, you must fund your promotion. I don't say I will fund your promotion, right? So just make sure that you don't let go of pricing as your key variable and what you determine, and not let retail start taking control of pricing.
Understood. Okay. This was super helpful for us. I'll now pass the questions to Aditya. Aditya will take it from here.
Thank you, Indrajit. Hi, everyone, again. So the answer to some of my questions will overlap with some of the points you have covered, but I'm anyway going to ask them because I genuinely believe they're quite relevant to early stage startups in this space. So my first question is, figuring out the right sales revenue channel mix at an early stage is quite difficult for a FMCG brand, right? It's very easy to believe that, hey, I'll be an omni-channel brand from day one. But there are certain challenges which come with that, considering the resources are very limited for a young brand. And we have also, in our early years, faced this struggle, right? So how does a brand figure out what is that right channel mix that they should have, right? And how do they create that balance until obviously we start following the consumer, like we discussed, we figure out what kind of packaging and pricing works for the SKUs. That always comes at a slightly later stage, right? In the early first couple of years, it's very tough to figure those things out. So I would love to hear your take on that.
I think GT is a very expensive channel to enter for a young brand, right? When I say expensive, GT is a very demand-driven channel, right? E-commerce is at the other end, which is, you can list, you can build search, right? And you can start selling, right? So I would, 25, 30 years ago, there was no option of launching anything online. There was nothing called online, right? Modern trade was the online of 25 years ago. So modern trade was where people launch brands. Because if you want to be in general trade and drive demand, you have in some way to spend money on advertising, right? Because otherwise your product tends to get lost, right? So I think depending on the stage of the brand, I think young brands following online to modern trade to GT is the right, in my view, the right way to go about it. Right? You need certain, because a per unit throughput of GT is very low. Right? Then add to that the cost of a sales force. Right? Whether it's your sales force or a distributor sales force, it's coming off your brand margin. So I have seen companies which actually go bust because they put stock in GT and it doesn't sell, right? And you're competing with big brands. That's my thinking. I think it's a logical conclusion when a brand scales that you'll get to GT, but to start with the GT mix, I think is not easy.
True. So I think, Aditya, you actually done a really good job in the way you thought of channels for your own startup. So let me compliment you for that. So you started in D2C,
Right.
which is absolutely right. Because I think the way to think about this is that when you launch a brand, you don't have a large consumer user base. So why would you want to be omni-channel anyway? So as your user base grows, your channel expansion grows. By expanding channels before your user base, it is hard and expensive, as Vinod was saying, to be able to therefore use that as a basis to grow your base. That doesn't quite work. The D2C is a boon in your era, which wasn't there in the past, and gives you a competitive advantage over big players. Because distribution, payment, and back office, everything is sorted. If you have a great idea and a brand to build with it, you can beat the biggest companies in the world. And that's the power of consumer brands today, which wasn't there in the past. And D2C gives you control, gives you margins, arguably, and gives you data, and is a brand building channel. Now, as you expand your user base, you will go beyond that. And you might go into modern retail next, or some specialized channels after doing e-commerce. And GT probably is the last that you would get into. And even there, I would suspect that you will start in the big cities, in the self-service retailers, the big GTs, because GT is not all the small Kirana stores. There's so many.
Wow.
And then go down. So if you find on D2C that 30 to 40% of your business is coming from tier 2 towns, that's a signal that your user base is expanding and you need to expand your distribution. And therefore your D2C channel will, the volumes that you get there and where you get it from will guide you in your channel expansion. But start there, as you've done very successfully.
Thank you.
One way of looking at this whole distribution strategy can be catchment specific. Instead of dividing it by channels, you can look at a particular catchment. It may be having a combination of modern trade and GT, and see how many outlets you can sustain certain level of throughput. When you are handling a perishable with a short shelf life, what you don't sell after a particular point in time is as important as what you are selling. Otherwise, very soon you'll get saddled with the unsold stocks because of fragmentation. So if you are able to see sustainable throughput in the set of stores which you have targeted, and then expand in a calibrated way in each catchment, that is one way of having the expansion in multi-channel. Rather than going across modern trade first, followed by general trade. Sometimes these foods are have affinity to certain type of catchment where you can penetrate more, including GT in a particular catchment.
Right. Yeah, that's a good, I think, appropriate answer, I think, from each of y'all. But one more thing I would like to highlight, while D2C sounds like a very easy option, right? Because we have been through the D2C journey and we have gotten away because of the high SKU count that we have in Snackable, right? It is quite difficult to crack the D2C channel with a limited range of products, right? Because especially in a category like snacking, what happens is there's a certain monotony which sets in with the customer, and he wants a little more variety. So say for example, if D2C may not be the ideal fit for a FMCG brand, would you suggest MT first as the first strategy? Is that the most obvious choice?
You know, modern trade is just a sophisticated layout of a GT, right? It gives access to the consumer, to the brand. It has, but it doesn't take away the responsibility of building trial with the brand. In D2C, you have the luxury of trial building tools. In modern trade, all you get is a shelf, right? So, you know, big brands tend to use modern trade, but it is, in my view, you know, the onus of building that trial is still with the brand. So I don't think modern trade is slightly easier because, you know, you can put the brand in the face of the consumer, right? But you know, it doesn't mean that if you take an end cap in a retailer like and put the brand there, our biggest problem brands on end caps are new brands, right? Right, because brands make the assumption that just because you put it on an end cap, the consumer is going to run and buy it. Right? I don't think it works like that. I think you still need to go through that journey of building awareness, building trial, you know. Whereas in D2C, you have the opportunity to do that, right? Though I don't agree with you that you need to fragment to build that. I think you can still build it in a different way. But, you know, big brands are going D2C because you have so much skill with consumers, right? And that's the way to think about it. I think big brands realize that you can take their pants off if you do a good job. I mean, huge brands have been built D2C. I mean, think of beauty brands that L'Oreal owns. A lot of their D2C portfolio are actually acquisitions, right? And they bought them because they were so successful.
No, I think that's very insightful. So I'll move on to the next question. So again, it's around a controversial topic, general trade, I think, which we have discussed extensively. But so again, as a brand, you know, we discussed that the right channel mix would be to ideally start with D2C, then go to MT, and then go to GT, or like Vasant mentioned, try it, you know, in a very structured manner in certain cities. But say, for example, a young brand has kind of achieved a learning curve in D2C and modern trade and is intending to go into general trade. What would be the right go-to market strategy? Should it be, you know, to focus just on one city, go deep, or focus on the top tier one cities, use data to kind of figure out where the audience is purchasing from through the D2C portal, and then decide which geographies to focus on? And also, there's also another, you know, model which younger brands, which predominantly larger brands have been using, the cash and carry model, where you just, you know, spray across the country, across multiple distributors. It does help cash flows, but it may not lead to a lot of brand building, right? So I think that would be one area I would like to discuss with you all.
I think the last thing that you said, which is to spray stock across the country and hope for the best, is the worst way to do it, right? I mean, you know, the cost of return, it'll be so high that it'll be crazy. You know, India is a big enough country not to try and be national, or even, you know, I mean, there's enough of a consumer base. I would always say, given the ability of targeted media today and the ability to do it in such a focused, pinpointed fashion, I would say if you want to, I would say start either channel specific or city specific. Get experience before you expand, right? There are so many variables that you learn when you expand, right? If you are spread, and the biggest variable is the cost of manpower, right? The moment you get to 5 cities, you're multiplying your overhead by 5, right? And that's something that, you know, will really catch up with you when your sales throughputs are low. So I would urge that start specific, build volume, build trial, move to the next step after you've reached a certain metric in a geography. right? Short-term cash flows are not what drives business health, right? I think that is a very deceptive, those are deceptive cash flows.
One, yes.
No, go ahead, Vasant. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. No, I mean, coming from a retail perspective, first thing is FMCG is an ocean. Today, FMCG in India is close to $100 billion, and it is doubling every 5 years. So it's a large ocean. Secondly, the number of retailers in India has the highest per capita retailers in the world. Like they say, for every 10 people, there is one outlet. So again, it's an ocean. So there's no point in trying to do any big bang because you will get lost. So you should approach it in a manner where you can sustain. When you distribute somewhere, you have to ensure that the place where you distribute should keep the product visible. There should be customers who connect and then come for repeat purchase. What matters is repeat purchase, not the first time purchase. And then you should be able to sustain the retailer with sufficient range for them to attract the consumer. If you approach that way with end consumer and sustainable retail network in mind, then the market is huge. There's no need to be in a tearing hurry to spread across very fast and get lost. You go in a calibrated manner with the retail network expansion stage by stage, either as Vinod said, go city by city or market by market or store class by store class, but do in a manner where it is sustainable. It doesn't snap in terms of your supply chain or product range and ending up into a problem. So that's what I wish to say. There is enough market out there for a good value proposition.
Well said. So I think what you're hearing is first, there's no quick fix in GT. So you need a bit of patience. So don't try and do the crazy thing of trying to dump everything into GT, which will only work one time. So there is no quick fix. Brands have been built over time. Second is play to your strengths. So if you don't have any business in Kerala, but you're big in Mumbai, expand into GT in Mumbai, not Kerala. Don't make that mistake. And you will find that your D2C channel gives you good indication of where you're building a consumer base. Follow that. Don't look for the gaps and the opportunities. You will find yourself out of control. Segment the GT channel and start at the top end. Find a good intermediary to help you do that. And the last comment I'll make is don't be lazy about GT. I don't see enough in India of, for instance, shelf-ready packaging in GT. If you travel to Latin America or look at what happens with the equivalent of Kiranas there, it's fabulous shelf-ready packaging, which makes a huge difference. When you don't have salesmen going there, you don't have merchandisers going there, to be able to put something that can leap off and create merchandising impact for you. So it doesn't come without cost and it doesn't come without thought. And feel that you are looking at it in the right way and giving yourself a little bit of time and patience to build your strength there.
Got it. Thanks a lot. I think all the answers are very insightful. Sharan, do you want to take over?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you all. That was a very fruitful and insightful discussion. I guess you could attribute it to the number of years coming from this space. I think we are now good to open the floor for questions. Ladies and gentlemen, in case you have a question, please utilize the raise hand feature. And upon prompting your name, please unmute yourself and ask your question. We will now open for questions. Hi, Johnny. We see a question from you. Please unmute yourself and ask.
Sure. Couldn't resist the chance to talk to Vinod and Vasant again. Just an interesting listening to this fantastic insights and on various funds and especially the power brands, power SKUs. We're using the same strategy in China, 3 SKUs, and it's growing leaps and bounds. But coming to another point, is there for talking to these new people, any reference brand like Paperboat? Maybe it started in 2013, 14. They seem to have grown with those power SKUs, with niche, with packaging, gone into different trade. Is there any story or is there any reference for all of us from a brand like that? Did you get the question? Or?
The honest answer, Johnny, I don't know. I really don't know. Don't know enough about that business to, but I think when I, in a simple way, I think they built consumer value over with good brand, good product and stuff like that. So I have no idea about that business, honestly.
Sure. Just wondered if there was some reference or something to, because a lot of, a lot of questions on how to get into distribution, product, pricing. Just wondering if there's any reference brand that you knew about, any reference brand actually, which has done it of the recent times.
So I know of a brand in the US which did it quite well. It started as D2C. It's a brand called Glossier, right? Which actually built it in quick time, 4 to 5 years, but built off D2C, completely built off D2C. Because I think Sanjay made a very valid point. If you, whichever channel you're in, you need a consumer reason to exist. And the D2C seems to offer the fastest way to build preference and your knowledge that you're building preference. Right? In the old days, you put it into GT and you waited for offtake, and then you discovered that offtake was not there because consumers didn't like your brand. Right? Today, you seem to get that feedback loop is so much faster that you can do something with that data. And I think that is the advantage of today. And I think that is something that young brands can use very well.
I heard about this brand, Delicious, the meat. Yeah, they seem to have done a good job in connecting with the customers, expanding fast, and I think that growth is one good example of a D2C brand, which can go much further now.
Great, thanks.
Thank you for that. Soumya, do you have a question? I see you have unmuted. Okay, maybe not. Sure. If no one has any further questions, may I just request our co-founder Anil Gudibande to address the audience and perhaps give the closing remarks?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sharan. And thank you to all the panelists, Vinod, Vasant, and Sanjay. We are ever grateful to you for all your support that you extend to OneCrowd in so many different ways. And of course, to Anusha, Aditya, and Indrajit for participating and for offering questions that that have come, I can see from the businesses that they are running and therefore are very, very pertinent. But if I can choose two words to kind of describe the entire proceedings, it's think consumer. And what I heard was that there are several ways to God, but your God is consumer. And I think that is so telling. It is not telling just for the three startups that have so kindly participated in the evening's program, but really for almost every business that we've invested in. And I don't know how many of them are on this webinar, but there's a lot to take away from that. I particularly like the comments on following the customer and customer journey, because I think there's a lot that the customer can really tell you and teach you about your own business. But it was a great evening. Sanjay, Vinod, Vasant, thank you so very much. And thank you, Indrajit, Aditya, Anusha, and certainly to all of you for having spared so much time this evening and to make this such a lively event. Thank you so much.
Thank you.